Guys, what's up? I hope you're doing okay. So we're gonna do what we did yesterday. Bubby, invite me if you want me to join your server. It's Sky Epic, remember?
This is Scott.
Do you want me to help you?
This is Scott.
So yeah, we're gonna do what we did yesterday, finishing up that podcast I was listening to. I'll just highlight that. I don't know if we have the ability to stream anything else after that. Depends on how I feel. So yeah, I know I said I wasn't gonna stream, but actually I got everything I needed to get done today, and even parts of my comic last night. So I just kind of slept in this morning, and I just was like, you know what, I feel fine. So that's kind of all why I didn't stream this morning. So I was like, yeah, I'll just do it today. I have no idea what we're doing tomorrow. I don't know if my mom wants me over. I did ask her to like at least print out something so I can sign it to take to school. Since our printer doesn't have the paper, we can't afford to print out our paper or printer anymore because our ink is like over 100 and something bucks. It's really stupid, but it is what it is. All right, are you gonna invite me, Bubs? Or do you not know how?
Do it.
Okay. So Bubby's gonna see if he can invite me to server. Hopefully he can. Oh, there I am.
Oh!
Hmm?
I pick you up. Yeah, but you
I don't know why I can't join. Because both of our accounts aren't even the same unless... That's so weird. So we've been having issues with Minecraft lately. And I think it's just Minecraft just isn't as great as it used to be. That's so weird to me. I'm wondering if it might have something to do with the Xbox Companion app that we're supposed to switch from. Yeah, I think something went weird with this account. All right, give me a second. I'm trying to get everything to just work. I think I know what happened. I don't know, Bubby. Something is wrong. It's definitely something wrong with the app. And I think they want us to change apps, but I don't know how to do all that. Excuse me. Okay, so I know why you can't join, because for some reason you can't log in. Alright, Bubby, you're gonna have to just join me then. What world do you want to work? I'm gonna do this Bubby City we were gonna make? Or do you want to make a new world?
I'll go to the mushroom room.
Okay. Yeah, it won't let me log in, so I'm gonna have to figure that out later. I just keep forgetting to. That's my only problem. Hey, what's up, Space? Yay, we got to find! I'm glad you were able to join this time. I don't know what happened yesterday. I was surprised I didn't get that many viewers. I was like, maybe it's because of weird fluke or something. So here.
Especially when you sleep.
So yeah, we're gonna be listening to a podcast while we're here. I kind of put it to the time stamp that it was at last time. My son decided to destroy my mansion. Even though he has other ways of destroying it, but so we're gonna listen and just say let me yeah. Let's start. It looks cool. Thanks. Yeah. All right, let's start. The only thing is like I tested it last time. And I have to turn off the audio for desktop for it to work. Otherwise, it does this really weird robotic voice. So no Minecraft music. All right, so hopefully you can hear it. It worked last time, so let me know if you can hear it.
Took too much of a dose of something. You can't settle down.
Yeah, which is something both full moons and Mercury conjunct Uranus or hard aspects between Mercury and Uranus do on their own. So having those coincide, that's kind of a frenetic couple of days, especially peaking
Hopefully you can
around
hear
the
it.
3rd and the 4th. And then the next day on the 5th, Venus goes into Leo and opposes Pluto, which is kind of tense, as we've talked about. There is some leveling off of that, or some sort of mitigation or assuaging of that when Venus then moves into the exact square with Jupiter over the next few days, culminating around the 10th and 11th. So that's one of our more positive aspects this month, is a Venus-Jupiter square with reception, and that's one of the things, Jupiter being in Taurus, that's going to help take some of the edge off of the Venus retrograde, and that even if there's major issues that Venus brings up during the course of the retrograde and its co-presence or conjunction with Mars, there's some counterbalancing, like positive influence that's offsetting things in notable ways with Jupiter in that superior position.
Oh, good.
in
You can.
Taurus.
I'm glad.
Yeah, and to add to that, with Jupiter in Taurus, right? It's Jupiter in a Venus-ruled sign, and so Jupiter is describing for us sort of what we can learn from. Jupiter makes whatever it touches potentially educational, or helps expose how something could, or helps reveal how something could be improved or bettered. Jupiter confirms, but then wants to make things better. Right? Jupiter's like, what you're doing is great. How about also this? Like, that would be a way to accomplish what you're doing more effectively, or with less collateral damage or whatever. And so Jupiter sort of Jupiter teaching lessons from the Venus ruled place, or offering to make Venus things more about self-improvement or bettering relationships, or et cetera, et cetera. Like Kira, you were saying, with
I'm
Venus
gonna try
retrograde,
to-
don't just look at the place Venus is stationing retrograde. Look at the houses that are Venus ruled in your nativity, with like the parts of your life that are already run on Venus. And so Jupiter's in one of them, like ready to help figure out how this can work better. And so I think that's a nice thing.
And this is just part one. We have
I'll
3
make
of
this
these,
school,
right?
Mommy.
So over the
I
next
make
couple
this
months.
school.
So
Of the
yeah.
exact aspect
I
of
make
Venus and
the school
Jupiter.
together,
Yeah,
Mommy.
exactly.
I don't want you to wreck up my
Got it.
mansion, though.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking also about mitigations. It's
Let
something
me-
that in rereading.
Well, then don't put
or
wa-
reading
schools
Ben's
don't have
translation of
water.
Firmicus, and reading Firmicus again for the first time in several years, the entire
I'll
thing,
make the
he's just
school
constantly
together.
talking about mitigations.
We are, Bubby.
And he'll give, here's like a really difficult combination and difficult aspect, but then he'll say, however, if this placement is there,
I'll make
adding in
the
a
school
positive
together.
thing, then it will
I know.
offset
I'm
it.
just getting rid of the
So you
water. I
start
don't
to
like
think
it.
about scenarios of, if something
I
bad
like
or
water.
negative or
I
subjectively
don't.
difficult
like
happens,
We can take it outside.
But then if you're able to find some sort of outside help that comes in and is able to make
at
things
me.
better, it's like if
I'm
you
a
get sick,
teapot.
but then you're able to go to a doctor and the doctor tells you
That's
what's wrong and
teapot.
gives you some
Yes,
medicine and is
Bubbies.
able to like heal you from
inside.
being sick, that's like a mitigation.
Yeah, some of we're doing a chapter in my year 3 program where everyone's reading some Firmicus, and one of the students said that
It has missed.
their partner had a configuration, a pretty complicated configuration that basically said that proposed life-threatening illness of a very specific nature, and that the person would die from it without an aspect from Jupiter. And their partner had exactly that illness and
Yeah.
almost died, but a doctor came in and was able to ferry them through it. And there was a trine from Jupiter too. It was an eighth house configuration. And that is one of the things I love about Firmicus is you get a very hyperbolically good or bad result. But then if blank aspects, then forget about it, right? And sometimes it just mellows it, and sometimes it cancels it. But you have both
Mhm.
like mitigating and canceling conditions for both really good
Okay, give me a
combinations
second.
and really bad combinations.
Let me get rid of all this water and then I'll invite you back.
Yeah, and that then also ties back into what you mentioned, Kira, which is that there's going to be two more exact Jupiter aspects, months later or weeks later, once Venus goes retrograde, where Venus is going to return back to that configuration of Jupiter, and that may be the period in which Venus is able to go back and find some of the mitigating things that help to resolve the situation especially, for example, in people's Leo houses, or perhaps in the houses that Venus rules, and find the resolution
I have an
which
idea.
offsets or mitigates the dust that was kicked up by Mars transiting through Leo in the first place. So it feels then like a large part of June is Mars sort of creating some of the problems in that area of the life, the strife or the difficulties or the conflict, the separations, but then Venus having to go through that period of 40 days and 40 nights of retrograding back in order to find some of the solutions, in order to mend and reconcile some of the problems that Mars created.
Yeah, the more
Exactly.
the more we look at this, the more there might be a little bit more bark than bite, because the actual retrograde portion, is very configured to Jupiter, right? Venus will be moving backwards towards Jupiter for a lot of that, and Mars will be, off somewhere else doing Mars stuff in Virgo. But looking like getting towards the direct station, it's at 12, Jupiter's at 15. And so it's Venus is coming off of another aspect to the second exact aspect to Jupiter, and then turning around right back into another exact aspect with Jupiter. And we do have by September we do have Mars in a Venus ruled sign, but in a sextile with Venus. Anyway, it's interesting that again this one might be front loaded, where the actual retrograde isn't as hard as the road into the retrograde.
Yeah, we even have like this is kind of getting ahead, but Mercury is going to eventually retrograde in Virgo and will be trining Jupiter 3 times throughout that August September period. So it feels like Jupiter is really holding it down for both retrogrades, and feels really like solutions, support oriented for the summer before Jupiter then goes retrograde and kind of takes a break.
Yeah, the only thing that's kind of a wild card factor when Venus is stationing, though, and that throws a little bit of an unexpected wrench into things, is just when Venus stations retrograde at 28 Leo, it's also kind of closely squaring Uranus, which has already made it all the way up to 22 degrees of Taurus at this point, and is like 30 days from stationing. So it's like we have tied in with this entire Venus retrograde, which we didn't have during the last Venus retrograde in Leo, is we have this square with Uranus, which at the very least is introducing some sort of unexpected or disruptive component. It may just be that it requires unique or like novel solutions in order to fix some of the things that came up that are the problems that arose under the Venus retrograde. But some of the twists and turns of that are going to be, I think, some unexpected in terms of writing that script and the surprises that come up in the process.
Yeah, 100%. I think if we're expecting or I should say expecting a calmer retrograde than expected, that the smoothing that Jupiter can do in aspect with Venus that comes after the the square to Uranus, right? Definitely got to get through that first portion, because that is, on a very simple level, Uranus is destabilizing, and harm the many things that Venus looks after. Many of them depend on harmony and relational harmony and stability. And the retrogradation is already sort of unpicking that. And Uranus in a Venus ruled sign is going to further push that.
Yeah, thinking about like the past couple of Venus retrogrades and the kind of major signatures of them. We had, the last one with Pluto stationed conjunct Pluto, so that one had a really Plutonian signature. The one before that, it stationed square Neptune, so that one had a
that
really
poor squid.
Neptunian signature. And I think the one before that was Scorpio, which would have had the Uranus opposition, I think. So I don't know, I've just been thinking about how the outers have been really influencing a lot of the past Venus retrogrades, and how this one has that Uranus flavor, which I think I'll prefer over Pluto. The last one was really rough, so we'll see.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know I will prefer it. That was like on my descendant with Pluto.
It was intense. Yeah. But yeah, Jupiter kind of is around this time to help a bit. So
Yeah, I'll take it.
yeah.
So people should pay attention to that first Jupiter aspect happening there around the 11th and the 12th. You can see there on the transit timeline, and that's one of the more positive aspects this month. There are other positive aspects coming later. One of the things that happens around that time that's important is that Pluto's going to retrograde out of Aquarius, and it's going to move back into Capricorn and bring us back into that transit and bring something back from that time period that we've experienced so much of over the past decades, since Pluto's been transiting through Capricorn ever since 2008. So there's some unfinished business in that sign that sort of comes sharply back into focus there this month, starting on the 11th of June.
Yeah, back to back to money and power and the architecture of thrones and the weight of history and all the Pluto and Cap stuff.
Yeah, well, and some of that arose with like the banking crisis that happened around the time that Pluto ingressed into Capricorn in 2008. The creation of Bitcoin, as we've talked about before, and that going from humble origins to something that's actually like impacting world events. And then,
Bubby's off and on.
At least we have all these things about the debt ceiling crisis and whether that's going to turn into a big thing or disrupt things or not. And that's something that may be relevant there with Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn.
Sure, yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah, so on the more positive side of things, one of the best transits that I really like this month, and is definitely good for electional purposes, is that happens actually around the same time, is that Mercury departs from Taurus and moves into its home sign of Gemini, and we get this nice transit of Mercury in Gemini for a good chunk of June, which I really like. And although it has to pass through a sort of difficult square with Saturn at a certain point, one of its first
poor thing. I
aspects
keep
is a
forgetting that it's
nice
there.
sextile with Jupiter in aversion to Jupiter, but it has to pass through the square with Saturn around the 15th and 16th. But otherwise, it's a pretty nice transit of that planet through its home sign, and some of the things
I'm trying to
that are
capture it.
characteristic of Mercury and Gemini, which is an increase in like communication, socialness, intellectual activities like writing, poetry, speaking, and different things that come more naturally to Mercury when it's in its home sign.
Yeah, and it speeds things up usually.
I feel bad for it because it's just sitting
less
there.
Resistance, like things can just move quicker. Every year when Venus moves or Mercury moves through Gemini, I generally just see things speed up, like the exchanges of information, the conversations, the movement of objects, like things just speed up. And it's also tends to, Mercury and Gemini is very playful, right? Clever and playful.
Oh no.
And,
Oh no, I was gonna
witty,
save it, but
but that's going to be
Oh,
kind
well.
of
There's not much I can do about it.
postponed until it
Well,
gets
kind of
past
bad.
that square with Saturn. And
Yeah. Well, and it hits a nice sextile, and I meant to say not with Jupiter, with Venus, like right after that, when it gets to 10 Gemini, it sextiles Venus at 10
Oh.
Leo. But it's
All
weird
right,
that
now I gotta get
Saturn's
rid of.
stationing right at the same time, just after that square between
Now I gotta
Mercury and
get
Saturn
somehow get rid
completes.
of all
So
these
this
sheep.
is in the same way that we
I
just
don't know
had
how
the very
to.
first station of Pluto in Aquarius of many during that long transit that's going to happen to Pluto in Aquarius.
I won't find
This
them.
month, right in the middle of June, we're having our very
We're
first
just gonna have
station
them
of
come out.
Saturn in Pisces of a long, 2+ year transit of Saturn going through that sign and stationing many times. So we have an intensification of that Saturn transit.
What we're
and
gonna do
especially
is
for
we're
people
gonna get
that
them all
have
out.
placements in the mutable
Ah!
signs around 7 degrees, we're going to see that as an intensification of that transit.
yeah, and it's worth noting this is as far into Pisces as Saturn's going to get this year, right? And so, if you have planets that were feeling, let's say at like 10 or 11 of a mutable sign that felt, oh, Saturn's coming, Saturn's coming, Saturn's coming, Saturn's like, that tide's going to go out. It's going to go back to the very beginning of Pisces. And then, if you're lucky enough like me to have a planet for Pisces, then then that transit, which started to maybe it was over, then Saturn's coming back, right? And Saturn is that, I don't know, Saturn probably it's that heavy flow, right? Ocean of lead, right? It's liquid but so heavy and quite likely toxic.
Yeah, us early Pisces risings have definitely been feeling it. I know Mo's in the audience. We have almost, I think, the same ascendant degree, and yeah, very much feeling the heaviness of Saturn in the first. Not as bad as my Saturn return in the 12th, but definitely feeling it. And yeah, just wanted to again piggyback off of the Mercury and Gemini piece. Mercury is also visible and fast right now too. So we were talking about how Mercury and Gemini, things go fast. It's even more speedy right now as it's heading towards that direct Kazemi at the end of the month. So I'm just excited about the Gemini house in our charts and finally getting a little bit of movement and traction, especially after that Saturn square, which feels like a tough decision, like a tough choice to make or something regarding Mercury.
Yeah, well, it's really so so Mercury and Saturn, right, don't agree on speed, right? One is the most spry, agile, quick member of the solar system. The other is the one that is not only slow but insists on slowness.
We famously had that what was a square between them during the last presidential election when it occurred, and then the votes were being recounted, and there was that delay and that slowness in counting up the votes, and until eventually the outcome of the election
All
was
right,
known.
we got all the sheep.
Yeah, great example. And then just looking at signs Pisces is the place where Mercury is in its fall.
Oh no!
And
The red
one way of
bump
thinking about that is that
button.
Pisces things they're not problems that you can solve quickly and with Mercury, right? It's just you have to go to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, right? It's just not something you can skate by.
Oh, got it all.
Quick answers and clever answers
There's some sheep in here, but
help
it'll be
at
okay.
all. And so sometimes when you have a Saturn Mercury configuration, Mercury can help figure out a Saturn problem. But it's a square, which is not the friendliest of aspects in the signs. Mercury's trying to do classic Mercury and Gemini, and Saturn's so interested in, how should I say, tedious emotional depth or really deep issues, or I don't know, life just feels this way, or there's nothing to be done, the I don't know, I don't want to get too morbid, but it feels like there's just one reaction might be just trying to skate around the big heavy thing because there's nothing to be done about it if you're more on the Mercury side, or being annoyed by the light conversation if you're on the Saturn and Pisces side. But it feels like it's going to be very hard for them to interact in a synergistic way.
Yeah, it's almost like Mercury's like, here's all of this information. Like, I see you have a problem. Here's all the facts and the information for you to solve it. And Saturn's like, that's not gonna do it. That's not gonna work. Like, we need some deep healing here. And Mercury's like, yeah, but here's a book you can read.
Yeah, right. Here's a Twitter account you can follow that that tweets about deep healing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, whereas
Yes, I agree with them. Yes, there was a lot of Shiva to get them out. Quinn had to spawn them all. And they're right about that because, okay, so I'm getting really confused with analyzing Pisces placements, especially in Saturn, because Saturn is such about discipline and governments and limitations and restrictions. And usually Saturn, when it transits in your chart, whatever it is in the area of life, it's going to bring challenges. But it's not in a way to make your life more difficult. It's more of the way to make you aware of what you need to work on and improve on. If you don't, then there's going to be a lot of limitations and restrictions preventing you from going after your goals if you do not address what Saturn's telling you. So Saturn and Pisces is really weird because like Pisces is very like deep thinking, kind of like they don't really they go really deep and wanting to understand why certain things versus like I think Mercury is more like going through the facts and logics or the logics of everything, but doesn't necessarily question whether that truth is hurtful or if that's actually beneficial in the long term. They just say, well, it's just what it is, and then you just deal with it. But I know Mercury folks do struggle with like healing from wounds. They use comedy or ways of distraction to escape their problems, but in the end, they end up getting more hurt because they're not addressing the elephant in the room. So that's what Saturn's going to challenge. People with Gemini risings especially will be affected with this in a sense, especially Saturn's transits, especially if they're early degree Gemini rising. Anyone with heavy Gemini energy, not all Geminis will be affected though. I know you're Gemini space, but depending on where Gemini is ruling and how many placements you have, it might not affect you as much as you would think it would. So it really depends. Quinn.
Hey, mommy, I'm right here.
No, don't mess up my house.
Hey, mommy, I'm the basement. What are you doing? Hey!
I'm fixing the house. What the heck, Quinn? You're such a little imp. He is so bad. All right, come on, sheep. Let's go. He's such a punk. Come on, sheep. He's such a brat. I didn't know he had to like... Why are you trying to hurt the sheep?
Oh no! Help! There's a fire!
Oh, Quinn. You're just gonna hurt the sheep now. Oh, crap.
It got water again! The fire guys.
He's such a brat. Oh my gosh, Quinn!
I'm singing sheep again.
Oh, you punk. Oh, you can't attack mobs.
I just doing fire. No, mommy, do it. I can do it.
I know. I took that away.
Okay, Maya, you do.
I have no idea how to get rid of water properly, to be honest. We'll listen to the processes.
I'm going to play.
I forgot to start it. I'm sorry.
Saturn, since this is the first station in Pisces, probably says like this is going to take a
Oh,
lot
punk.
longer to work on than that, and that may be just the start of a long-term process of working on something over the course of the next few years.
Okay. Now my box, mommy. Take my stuff.
All right, so that's kind of a slow aspect that's happening there around the 15th, but then
Do it.
right after that, by the 17th, Mercury forms that sextile with Venus, which is nice.
Mommy.
And some of that slowness
No,
and
I
that
watched,
dullness
okay?
of the Mercury Saturn
I
aspect
watched.
of previous days
Box is
is kind of
I'm a
assuaged and moves into the past. around that time, we actually get one of the more positive aspects of this month. And even though it's somewhat subtle and like low key, I kind of like it. It's a Jupiter-Saturn sextile that goes exact around the 19th.
Hmm?
But it's one of the, while more understated, one of the more stabilizing aspects that's happening this month in the sky, and it's one of the major outer planet configurations that's
Oh, I
occurring. I wanted to mention it.
Bobby, I just didn't want you to burn everything.
Because there's also reception. It's like Saturn is stationing in Pisces.
What the heck, Quinn? What did you do
Jupiter
in
comes
here?
up and it's stationing at 7 degrees of Pisces. Jupiter comes up and
Oh.
sextiles it at 7 degrees, and there's that reception between them. So it's like,
Why are you putting
whatever
water in
the
here?
problems again that Saturn is bringing up for people, and these are somewhat new problems that it's bringing up, or at least that Saturn is like forcing us to start focusing on more in the long term through challenges or surmountable difficulties that arise in that part of our life or that part of our chart. There's this
All right, I think this is
offsetting,
good.
positive influence.
I was
from
just trying to
Jupiter
fix
there at 7
everything.
degrees of Taurus that's
Yeah?
giving us an option for how to resolve those things and how to move past some of the difficulties and make them surmountable rather than just a stop sign, or rather than just a brick wall that you can't proceed
All right, there you go.
through, but perhaps maybe giving us an option.
Well, let
to
me
find a way
finish my
around
roof at
those
least.
obstacles and difficulties.
Yeah, or a way to sort of settle into the years of work that they require.
Yeah, this is the first time Jupiter and Saturn see each other since the conjunction when they both ingressed Aquarius back in December 2020. So I'm excited.
Okay, you don't
about
have to
it,
play
this
it.
opening sextile, because that is such a powerful.
I know. Let me
seeing
finish
moment, I
this
think,
then.
That Jupiter Saturn conjunction. That it's kind of cool that they're able to see each other again, and it's like
I don't think it's
I don't
even
know,
though.
it's just further development.
it's not even.
From that era.
That's a great point. This is the very first exact aspect that new 20-year cycle of Jupiter and Saturn inaugurated back in 2020, in late 2020. This is the first like opening new chapter in whatever that story was that started
Okay,
at that
there you
time,
go.
especially in terms of world events that'll be playing out over a 20-year period until the next conjunction of
Okay.
Jupiter and Saturn around 2040. But this is a
If
important turning point.
I, for
that
some reason,
story.
can't get you on yours because the
Yeah, I
account's
really
not
like that.
connected for some reason.
I like that perspective a lot. I
Let's
think that
see.
this is the first
Okay,
entering the
okay.
first notable
Give me 1 second,
phase
bubbies.
since then. And that there and it's a soft aspect. It's a
Give me 1
sextile,
second,
right?
okay?
So there's a like it seems doable, right? To relate the good to the bad, to look at the feel, or to see the opportunities and the obstacles as belonging to one landscape, rather than rather than experiencing them as like disconnected. But when you look at a map and you could say, oh, there are monsters here and there's treasure here, and if I go through the monsters I get the treasure, then the good and the bad get connected in a way. You're like, oh, I can do that, or I want to do that, or I don't want either of those. I'm just going to take the scenic route. But yes, stabilizing is such it's stable, and stabilizing not necessarily in a static way, but if you think of like stabilizing like the course, stabilizing a trajectory, like, oh no, we're definitely going in this direction and we know how to go in this direction. We're definitely heading east, or we're definitely crossing the mountains. And rather than like, oh, where do we go? Should we go there? Should we go here? Like that sort of directional confusion. This feels very
Oh, this one's
stabilizing in
different.
lots of senses, or in the way that a plane needs to have its course stabilized, right? It can't be wiggling in the sky.
Yeah, that's perfect, because that's just the keyword I was thinking of, was balance. There's a nice, with that sextile, balance between the sort of pessimism or pragmatism of Saturn and the optimism of Jupiter, and having those two qualities, because either of those, if they get too far out of balance or out of whack, if you go too far in the pessimistic realm of Saturn,
Okay,
then
that's
like
why
you'll
it's
never do
uneven.
anything because you'll always be afraid
Okay,
of
give me a
the
second, Bubbies. Let me finish my design.
consequences or of making a mistake or not making it perfect. Whereas if you go too far in the optimistic realm of Jupiter, you'll sort of like overshoot your mark and not be grounded enough to actually execute things in a way that's effective. But here with the sextile between those two planets, we get a nice balance of those two qualities, which should be really helpful and useful for people
I'm going to be done soon,
around
okay?
those times, especially in
I just want to
starting
finish my
different things
design. Bubby,
around that time in June.
Yeah. One further thing I like about it is I like Saturn having its ruler in a fixed sign, because Saturn in Pisces is so sort of, as we say, prone to shape shifting and sliding in this direction or another. Having a really having the ruler Jupiter in this case in a really stable place, I think, keeps us from some of the excesses of Saturn in Pisces' mutability, where it's like I don't even know what the difficulty is, or I don't know what's expected of me. It keeps sliding.
No,
That stability with Saturn makes it easier to
Mommy.
Yep.
it makes it easier, for example, to eat well if you have a diet planned out. You're like, okay, I know these are the parameters I'm going to eat under, and so I know how to do this.
Quinn, can you
I'm just
please
going to
stop
do
doing that?
that. Versus like, I don't know, I should eat better, but I don't have a plan, right? I have no fixed course.
I'm glad you said food, like eating brought us to food, because it does. This sextile feels so much more notably like ethereal and physical than the conjunction in Aquarius. So yeah, again, it just feels like fertile, and like we're able to sort of put things into place for the long term. Just more tangible and less just like ideas.
So my our electional chart for this month actually really takes that into account, so that you can sort of capture the energy of that sextile. So I wanted to mention that election here really quick. So this is the most auspicious date in June that Lisa Scheim and I were able to find in our Auspicious Elections podcast this month, which is available on Patreon. To show this chart, so the chart is set for June 18th, 2023, starting around 11:56
I tried.
a.m., 11:56 in the morning, roughly just before noon.
It looks even now, but sometimes it doesn't feel
and the ruler of the
even.
ascendant is Mercury up at 12 degrees of Gemini. So Mercury has cleared that square with Saturn that we were talking about earlier, and it still has, it was just coming off of that sextile with Venus at 11 degrees of Leo. So this is a great chart for career matters, the public, being in the public, and public reputation, because Mercury's in the 10th whole sign house. It's in its own domicile or in its own sign in Gemini. And it's generally just
this is where the roof's going to start.
So it's a pretty strong chart for career matters and other types of 10th house activities involving.
You want to go to in there?
Communication, speaking, social things to a certain extent. Anything that requires quick but effective bursts of communication and of transferring things, essentially. So other features of this chart are that the moon is in Cancer in the 11th whole sign house, the place of friends,
or another world, whatever it's
and
called.
groups. So it's also a very good chart for friends and groups and social movements and
where do you want to go?
That involve friends.
I remember I can't join your server.
Cancer, and it's applying to a sextile with Jupiter and Taurus. Jupiter is in the 9th house of religion, philosophy, education,
you can have some.
foreign travel, and is very well placed. And it's still applying to that exact balance of sextile with Saturn, which is over at 7 degrees of Pisces in the 7th whole sign house. It's in a D chart, so it's heavily mitigated, not just by sect, but also by that sextile with Jupiter. So that creates a good chart also for 9th house matters. And generally it's kind of rare that you find a chart in which both the ruler of the ascendant and the moon are in such good shapes. And so this is our primary election of the month that we wanted to recommend for starting major business ventures or other undertakings in which you want an auspicious date to start things under. This is our favorite chart of the month.
We are in the overworld.
What kind of things would you two use?
Mushroom World's still part of the
Mercury
overworld.
election for where Mercury's in Gemini?
But I want to go to the green overworld.
Like a launch where you have to send out emails, communications, social media posts, especially with the sun up there too in the 10th.
Mommy,
Yeah, any
What?
sort of launch I think this would be great for. I
I'll
love
go
that
to the
moon
green
Jupiter sextile.
overworld.
It's really sweet.
Yeah, it's really soft and really balanced in a positive way that I
Mommy.
really liked.
Hey, Mommy.
So
Huh?
that is our primary electional chart for the month. We found, I think, at least
We are in
6
the
or 7
overworld, love.
other electional charts
No,
during the
I
course of
need to go
June
to
that
the
we
green
just released
overworld.
on our Auspicious Elections
Yeah.
podcast, which is available. You can find out more information about it at theastrologypodcast.com/elections. It's one of the sort of bonus things that you get when you sign up for our Patreon at a certain level is
Be
access
careful.
to that 45-minute podcast
Hey,
each month
that's not
where we pick out
good.
at least 4 lucky electional charts for starting different types of ventures and undertakings. And since we're also halfway through the year, we recently discounted our year ahead electional report where we go through and we pick out the single best electional chart for each of the 12 months of the year. And since we're halfway through the year, we just discounted that at 50% off. So you can get a hold of that at theastrologypodcast.com/2023 report.
Let me see.
All right, so let's move back into the alignments and sort of talk about the later parts of the month. We've talked about Saturn stationing in Pisces. The later things that we need to talk about in order to sort of bring a close to June is that second lunation that occurs on the 18th of June, I think, in the sign of Gemini, is probably one of the last major things that we need to mention here, right?
Yep.
All right, let me put that up on the screen. So that occurs just before our electional chart. And we can see that the moon will conjoin the sun at 26 degrees of Gemini. And this lunation is a little bit tricky because it's very closely squared Neptune, which is at 27 degrees of Pisces. And Neptune, of course, is going to station there only 12 days later at 27 degrees of Pisces. So for some reason, by this time, around the middle of the month, and especially towards the end of the month, when Neptune stations on the very last day of June, we get this kind of intensification of some of that Neptunian energy.
Yeah, it's also, it's intensely Mercurial. Right? We have Mercury in Gemini and visible, fueling the conjunction of the sun and the moon there. And it also happens with Mercury still in a to the degree sextile with Venus. So it's like there's that playful, fun, inventive, artsy energy that the Mercury-Venus sextile brings is fueling the lunation. But then with that square with Neptune, there is, there is either, there is like a strong like pull towards escapism, to like
I'm trying to decide how to do the roof.
check out, and or it could be that escapism, if it overlaps with reality, can be delusional, right? Well, if it's kept separate from the rest of life, then it's a an escape. But there's definitely a sort of pull towards the imaginal. But it like the bones of it, like the actual conjunction and its ruler are just super. It's Gemini juice, right? But with just like this this strong
I don't think this is gonna work.
siren song from Neptune and Pisces.
Yeah, it feels like a super, super creative new moon. It feels just like for the artists out there, for the people who are, creating worlds and writers, writing fiction, all the fantasy. It just feels like this is such a good moon to, to write, to create under. Yeah.
She is
Not the
correct.
best if you're having to.
She's completely correct from that, because the last few weeks, I have been much more like into my comic, so I've been actually editing it. I don't know if you're still awake, Space. If you need to go to bed, just go ahead. But if you're still there, I was just gonna say, Well, I'll still say it because you can always come back and watch it. But I was gonna say is that Keel like puppy did who pooped? Was that Keel? You smell
Yeah.
something? Yeah, he went out there and pooped. Okay, Keel like really did a big dookie, and the litter boxes are kind of close to our room, so we have the laundry room and the bathroom in all our little areas, so you can sometimes smell when Kale goes to the bathroom. But anyway, I'm sorry getting distracted. Yes, I've been very creative lately. I've been like editing my comic, making sure everything's flowing. I actually kind of messed up my script space. So I have to kind of like figure out how to make sure it all flows okay because like I'm redoing chapters 23 or 26 to about 33 and I messed up 31 and 32 and I'm like fuck. So 30 and below I'm gonna just go ahead and edit and make sure it all flows well. That's what I'm doing right now, and then once I get that I'll finish up that arc and then I will have it to where it's like all together. It's just gonna take some time, maybe a week or two. So yeah, I've been more motivated to stay up really late to work on it because like the best time to work on like anything really art wise is staying up late for me. And yeah, so they're right about the creativity has been really intense for me.
Like write a research paper for something very fact oriented and fact based, but it feels like it can just be really great for artists and musicians and things like that.
Yeah.
Green side.
Yeah, and maybe for people to get in touch with their
I'll
creative,
play-
the
I'll play the
use of
green
creativity
side
as an
where
outlet
the
sometimes
sheep
can be really helpful.
I'll
And
Okay,
something
okay,
maybe
okay.
if people
Give me a
aren't
second,
in touch
okay.
with that this
I'll go
lunation
to
would
the
be really
grass
useful
one.
for
Where the small
just to
sheep.
take advantage of it.
Yeah, kind of getting
Okay.
out the writer's block that the
Are you
square to Saturn might have created.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it'll also be pretty. I think it works socially.
Quinn, stop
too.
doing that.
Like it's fun. A little
But Mom, I
Neptune
wanna go to
is
school
not a problem
together.
when you're just hanging
Okay,
out.
you want to come back?
You make
Okay, no
stuff
more
up really
water
fun,
and sheep
telling
everywhere, okay?
stories, imagining
But we
things.
get
Too much.
small.
Yeah, or
There's a
do
village.
that and
There's the
just be aware.
village and there's
There are
sheep
consequences the
on it.
next day, but
The sheep
you're
go in the
rarely
farm
beaten.
though. I made a farm down there.
Where's the farm?
Yeah, that's a
Down
good
here.
that's a good point though in terms of the
And you were making farms too, I thought.
the
So
nature of
this is
myth
where
and,
all the
like,
scholars go.
storytelling as
Is
an
that
important part of culture, but
Down
also
there,
an
bubs.
important
That's where
part
the
of just
farm
the human
areas.
experience.
Are you gonna come?
Tapping
I'll let you
into
build, but don't put
and
more water or lava in
the
it, okay?
enjoyment of that, like you said,
Mommy,
Austin,
I
the
wanna
imaginal realm
I want to go
as
to
a
the
realm
school
of
one.
not just
Wait, I wanna
creativity,
go-
but also
I wanna build the
escape,
school
but sometimes
with the
escape
cabin.
being necessary in order to
This could be the
recharge
school if you
sort of
want it to be,
internally
but
from
you
the
can't
world.
add any more
Like
sheep or
whatever
animals.
your escape is, better if it's
And that's
sort
the
of a
farm.
constructive version, or at
That's
least like a
the farm.
non-harmful version of that. But there's many different ways
I
that we
wanna
all
go to
escape
the
from the
green
world
I wanna go
in
to
a way
the
that's
green side.
healing or that
Wait,
recharges us and
wait.
prepares us for then going out
I'll
and,
go to
and
the green
doing
I'll
things
go
that we
to
have
the
to do
grass
in
side.
mundane reality
Where there's
in a way
tree
that's
on
more
it.
effective.
But that,
Yeah, it's nicely put, Chris.
Yeah.
There's
I know,
also
go
like
to the
with
mushroom
stories,
one.
like sometimes that
I'll go to
going
the city
into
one.
stories that are not literally
I'll go to
true,
the
but is
city
part of
one, Mommy.
Can I
us
listen to this
evaluating
podcast? I'm listening and
what
then I'll
kind of
answer you.
story am I
But I
in,
wanna go
and
to
it's
the
like,
city
and
one.
also what kind of story am I in
Okay,
this
give me a
part of my
second.
life? Because sometimes we talk about someone's lost the plot, right? And there are also points where we feel like we found the plot, like, oh, this is what this part of my life is
Sheep, I'm
about.
watching you.
I can play my role
But you keep
well
not
now that I know
dying.
what I
Keep
was
not
cast
dying.
as, right? I thought I was this, but this is actually this kind of story, so I
Keep
need
not
to,
doing
and I don't hate it. I just thought I was
Keep
in a
not
different
doing
story,
it.
and so
Don't
I wasn't
stop.
doing a very good job.
That's why you make it. Why you doing
Yeah.
it?
You told
For
me
sure.
to add you in this, so I am.
Yeah, self-narratives and the reflection on what is our narrative and what is our story. It makes me think of like the hero's journey and how you have that historically, that notion of like
that the
this
way?
narrative
Mm-hmm.
That shows up in
Okay,
different
you
cultures
build whatever
about
you
the
want,
hero's
okay?
journey and the necessary
Let's
steps that
build
take
the
place
school
during the course
Okay.
of that and how it shows up, but also how each of us internally has our own narrative about our life stories and how sometimes the need to
Okay.
embellish on that sometimes is a natural tendency, but sometimes during the process of periods of self-reflection, like especially a Venus retrograde, when you're looking back in relationships, or like we've just had a Mercury retrograde, you sometimes rethink your own life narrative and what are the stories that we tell ourselves about that, and whether it's like a accurate story or whether it's not an accurate depiction of like what the reality of things is.
Yeah,
This lunation makes me think of that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you really are one character for a decade or more, and then you don't realize it when life has changed, and that actually you're in a different role now, right? Like, no, you're not the the brooding, the dark brooding loner. You're actually you're a member of the community now, or you're an upstanding member of the community, and now you're the outcast and pariah. And how do you play that role? Or things change. And I gave dramatic examples, but sometimes those roles shift, and it takes us a while to catch up with where we actually are, right? Because we kind of stories kind of keep repeating until we actually take the time to rewrite them and check them against what's happening.
Yeah, when we all have, to some extent, the power to write our own life story and our own narratives, and to shape those to a certain extent, to the extent that we can. And sometimes the active shaping of those life narratives is actually really important in order to set like an end point of like, where do you want your story to go over the next year or 10 years or 20 years or what have you. Like, what narrative do you want to have, and where do you want to play? What role do you want to play in that narrative? Are you going to play the narrative of like the hero or the villain or something in between? So I think that's relevant for this lunation, so that of what we're talking about, because literally the day after this lunation, Venus is going to hit 12 degrees of Leo, and that is the degree that it's going to retrograde back to at the end of the Venus retrograde. So somehow this lunation is setting the starting point for a lot of that, and some of the themes that we're going to return back to in a few months, when Venus basically retrogrades back to and returns back to this degree right around where we had this lunation in Gemini.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think part of the reason we kind of went into like narrative, character, storytelling, these are all the elements of drama, right? And we've got all this like solar stuff, right? Like the ruler of the lunation is in a perfect sextile with Venus, that is going to be the point of the direct station months later. Like Leo, when we talk about dramatic, it's often in a negative connotation, but this is also like Leo thinking of things in terms of a play and characters and roles that are performed, right?
Right. Yeah. And the like sort of like dramatic component to that, but also like the drama of everyone's individual life, especially from your own first person perspective, like all the positive and negative experiences that we're all having, because we're all the like main person in our own life story. How those things play out in a sort of dramatic sense is the narrative of our lives.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of the month and to the close of the month, where we just have that Neptune station, like we mentioned, Venus.
All right, let me. My battery's about to die, so I'm gonna go get that out real quick. So the sound's gonna go off for a minute.
Where's doing the battery? Don't use farther. Don't use far, Mommy. That would make me so sad. Don't make it far, Mommy.
Okay, I'm not making it for him.
Make it like that.
All right, give me a second. I got. I actually put the battery in the wrong way.
Okay, mommy. What I made, I need to make it closer, mommy. I want to make skeleton. No, I want to make this. I want to make a medium school. Like this. I want to put the skeleton. I'll put the land skeleton. And I want to put blue skeleton. That skeleton. Oh, what is this?
Okay. Give me a second.
Squares Uranus, although that really leads us over into the 1st of July. And we get Mercury conjoining the Sun at the halfway point through that cycle and the start of a new synodic cycle of Mercury and the Sun.
Yeah, and so right after, a few days after that new moon in Gemini, the Sun goes into Cancer, and Mercury follows the Sun into Cancer, and we have, with that shift from Gemini into Cancer, there's a lot of going everywhere and doing everything and thinking everything and saying everything in Gemini, and there's a movement toward as we say, the movement of planets into Cancer takes them into a more quiet, more internal, more felt, more sort of intimate place. And with Mercury moving swiftly to reunite with the Sun in Cancer, it's not just the central spotlight of things that's moving into that, into that more lunar landscape, but also the thoughts, right? Like Mercury goes from thinking everything, going everywhere to like really settling on, deeply felt truths and, what's really important to me and who's really important to me, things like that.
For sure. And around that time, just before Mercury does that, when it goes into Cancer, Mars does square Uranus from 21 Leo to 21 Taurus. And I think it's actually one of the tensest aspects this month and one of the most explosive ones besides the Venus-Pluto opposition earlier in the month. It's one of the ones that I think has some of the greatest potential for some unexpected challenges to arise, and for if Mars is going to kick up dust that Venus then has to go in and clean up afterwards. This is one of those key turning points where Mars is kind of kicking up some dust here around the 25th, 26th, and 27th of June.
It's almost like there are two completely different stories running there, right? There's Mars Uranus, and then there's Sun and Mercury. Like like the Sun Mercury is so quiet, intimate, like seeking reflection, and then Mars Uranus is loud and jarring.
Yeah, loud and jarring is a key word for Mars Uranus square. What are some other good keywords? Like unexpected fights, unexpected difficulties, unexpected separations is probably a good keyword for Mars square Uranus.
Yeah, and Mars square or Mars Uranus will also swiftly, it'll give you that escalated quickly moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
My mom has that. I'm like, that sounds exactly right. It's like, whoa, when did you get so mad all of a sudden? Yeah.
The United States has that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. The Mars Uranus conjunction in the 7th house, and sometimes we've talked about in the past of being associated with some of like the gun stuff with the United States, and some of that stuff coming up in the news. So being quick to anger, quick to resort to like violence or something, I guess, is one of the things that could be indicative of, like symbolically in a way.
Yeah, we've used a lot of sort of powder keg imagery with Mars Uranus in the past, where it's like who left, who's who was smoking around in the ammo depot again, where
Right.
and like with Mars Uranus, like it's that touch point of like it ignites in a second, right? The gunpowder is either on fire or not. It is not half on fire,
Hmm.
right? It's not a coal in a barbecue like burning hotter or not or a little dimmer, right? It's either like Uranus gives a very on off quality to
I'll put
Mars's
what
heating.
inside.
Right. And also like a technological component where Mars, in ancient astrology, they would just talk about like Mars and like swords or knives and cutting and things like that. But when Uranus unites with Mars, it sometimes brings this technological component to things of, what is a sword, digitally in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
No, I insist.
I was just gonna call back to last summer's really annoying Mars Uranus conjunction on the North Node, August 1st, and yeah, this is that opening square of that. Yeah, just a call back to that.
Oh,
Wasn't
great.
there something that happened? What was the news thing that happened around that time? So that was
I'm not looking forward to that because around that time is when I like was like right after my fight with my in-laws, the Uranus frame. And so that was a very intense time for me, but it was meant to happen. It was a major change, something through anger, something that would drastically change our lives. Now we're going to experience the square around the same time, I think is what they're saying. Let's keep listening.
2022 August. I'm trying to remember because I think something notable was happening back then.
We had a
Now
lot.
I'll
There,
put what inside
I was
right here.
I remember just like airplane drama personally. I just remember there was a lot of like airline stuff happening around that time.
Right. Oh
This
yeah,
is
and
the
it was the
guy.
North Node conjunction at the same time.
He's a teacher.
Yeah, it sucked.
He's a
Squaring
teacher.
Saturn, just ugh.
Yeah, bad
Right,
times.
Eddie.
So we have that square, and that's one of the last major aspects of the month. So it's a good time just to like pace yourself, and if you get into some sort of conflict, don't dive into something because sometimes, like you were saying,
Oh,
Austin,
wait,
things can go
Space, are you
quicker
still
if
asleep?
you
I
get
see you
into
said
some-
yeah, but I didn't know if you said that way
and so
later,
just to
earlier.
bring the technological
Trying to make sure
quality of Uranus
I
back to
see all
that,
your yes.
if you are just walking around outside in nature, there are not very many flammable substances, right? Like, I mean, leaves. I was just saying, like leaves, trees, etc. There are lots of flammable substances, but they don't go up in a flash. For volatile substances like gasoline, or gunpowder, etc., those require like intelligent manufacture and alchemical refinement to become that volatile. There's very little in the natural world that's that volatile, but we keep making, inventing more and more volatile substances, right?
Right?
Every Uranus and Gemini and Aquarius, apparently.
The last thing I just want to say, just because we've just been having so much Mars problems over the past year, honestly. And just thinking about those Mars ruled houses and how now that we're finally out of fall,
Do you want me to move?
and Mars is in Leo, I there might be a tendency to think that our Mars problems are done and over with.
You want me to make it smaller?
And not that they aren't, but just kind of being aware that this Uranus square is coming, because I just think that a lot of our Mars ruled houses have kind of taken a beating between eclipses and the retrograde and Mars in fall. So yeah, we're not quite out of it yet. I don't know if we're ever out of it, but I'm just thinking about that for myself. I gotta be aware that square is going to come and still cause some instability, I guess, with Mars ruled houses.
Or to very much test the stability. If you think you've got Mars handled, like that things are in working order there, that will certainly test it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's a good point.
There we go.
Yeah, my mom's sorry. I
Raising
cannot
that.
see what I type. Oh,
All
that's
right,
okay.
I think that's like the last major thing that we meant to mention in terms of the forecast for June, right?
But
What's that Mercury Kazemi? If we want to talk about that on the
Look at
30th,
that.
is that the 30th?
Mercury for Cassini means when a planet is like literally on the same degree as the sun sign. So, for example, a Mercury one is with Mercury and Sun literally be on top of each other, same
Why is
degree.
that here?
Usually, people have conjunction between Mercury and Sun, or they have it where they don't aspect at all. They can be a sign before or after. A conjunction with Mercury and Sun technically is where what you think and feel, like all the things you think of and say aligns with what is most important to you, versus someone who doesn't has a different sign Mercury to their Sun. The way they are is like, let's say they're an Aquarius with the Capricorn Mercury. They could be very much Aquarius, but when they speak or think, they think more like a Capricorn. So they kind of shine light. The Aquarius shines light into the Capricornian thinking pattern, I guess you could say, or the way they see. They usually have a dry sense of humor. They're practical. They're ambitious. Versus like maybe a Mercury Aquarius person with Aquarius Sun is more about humanity altogether. Like always wanting to be friends. Versus maybe the Aquarius with the Capricorn Mercury isn't so much about that. More about their ambitions, about their business, about their careers, and etc. It could be anything that they feel strongly that will represent them in society, whether it's a career, whether it's an interest, a hobby, whatever. That's what that Aquarius would probably want to put most focus on. Versus one who has an Aquarius Mercury would mostly, their focus would be about what is good for everyone around us, my friends, how I can network, how can I socialize, what can I stand up for? Who is the underdog should I cheer for? So, I mean, it can manifest in many different ways, but there's definitely a difference in how you express yourself depending on your Mercury. And so when a Kazemi happens, it's almost like they both are just so aligned with each other. They kind of mimic each other in a sense. So a Kazemi is really big because both of them are going to really, the sun's going to really shed light to that planet the most and amplifying its power and potence of effect. So there's like Mercury Kazemi somehow. I don't know if one can happen with a Mercury retrograde, but if it can, that could be kind of, you got to be careful. Don't make any like huge financial decisions. As well as like don't like go suddenly buy a car. It might not, like it might break down or something. I don't know, but yeah. But yeah. So I just wanted to, because he keeps saying certain terms I know that other people might not know what they mean.
Yeah, it's like right on the last day of the month. So there it is on June 30th. Mercury conjoining the Sun at 8 and 9 degrees of Cancer.
Okay. Do you want to put villagers in here now?
It has a nice trine with Saturn at 7 degrees of Pisces, and a nice, very nice sextile with Jupiter at 9 degrees of Taurus. And that's the beginning of Mercury's synodic cycle, where it is Kazemi, or it enters the heart of the Sun. And this looks like a pretty positive one relative to like other ones we've seen over the years.
Yeah, when we've been talking about in different contexts today, the sort of deep sense making about things, about our role in life and what's happened. And all that. This seems like the perfect moment for that, or this configuration seems to naturally lead to.
Let's make him a bed, place to sleep.
Workable reflection on where we're at, because it's imbibing aspects from both Saturn and Jupiter, right? Like, these difficulties and these ongoing pressures, and Jupiter, these opportunities, or like the fields that are beginning to flower over here, and that Mercury Sun just looking, how should we say, focusing the attention, like Mercury, like a lens focusing the light of the sun, at this point of like intimate reflection, even intimate with oneself. This feels like nice, like that's sort of like it almost will do the introspection for you, or like putting you into that place of coming, how should we say, like getting settled with a lot of where things are, even if Venus is about to do a bunch of stuff over there, but as far as Saturn, Jupiter, and the Sun are concerned, like there's a real like settling
Like that,
settling
puppies?
in sense making at a deep level there.
That, I love that. Also thinking about how this is our like diurnal team,
Hmm.
all kind of aspecting each
Oh,
other
there
from
it
these earth and water signs, and it
is.
does kind of feel like this blending of the mind and body, spirit, matter, especially because it's a
There we
superior
go.
Kazemi too, and Mercury's
Let me,
like
you put
out on the other
this
side of the
in.
sun, bringing
Go
in some
die.
intelligence
Go
for us.
die.
Yeah, it does feel perfect for that.
Come on, guy.
It's making me think of
It's at
I've
school.
been doing research for an episode and doing a lot of reading on like Hermeticism and Gnosticism, and
Hello.
a common word that was
It's
super
school
important in those religious and philosophical traditions was the word
It's
gnosis,
water
which
time.
means knowledge or knowing, as well as the word nous was really
Where's
central
everybody?
in their theology, which means mind, and this notion that that they really focused on, which is that each of us has like a spark of divinity from the original source, the divine mind, and that before birth, that spark or our souls like descend through the planetary spheres, and we pick up these qualities from each of the planets
Everyone.
that add to our
Ready.
character until eventually we're born and we're incarnated. But while we're here, occasionally that we, through contemplation and through philosophy and other things that involve the mind, we can sometimes like have these glimpses of like our original self or glimpses of some higher truths about the nature of the cosmos through this like internal process of thinking and through this transmission of that knowledge or of knowing. And this Valens actually says that the sun signifies nous. So this conjunction makes me think of that, of the ability to go internally into oneself and to reflect
Oh, we're
and
like
remember
aligning.
something about who we are at some core level and what we want out of life or what we are here to accomplish. Seems like a good moment of like for that here when we have such a auspicious Kazemi or conjunction with Mercury sextiling Jupiter and trining Saturn at the same time, and finding the balance between those energies.
Yeah, that tracks. I often teach the Mercury, the Mercury's conjunction with the Sun while direct as Mercury invisible down here. Mercury's not in
No.
not in the
Oh,
Earth realm,
is it
but
one more?
instead of being invisible because it's in the underworld with Hades and all
Why
the
is doing that? We're not doing
tormented
it.
souls and lost emails. Mercury
No,
is
yeah.
up above at the top of Mount Olympus, like communing with the gods, right? That
Okay,
not here,
mommy.
the mind is not here, but naturally seeking divine inspiration or divine message. And
Not
I've
like
definitely
that.
had, some pretty
Not like that,
Gnosticated
Mom.
moments under the Mercury Kazemi
Okay,
when it's
Mom.
direct.
Yeah, just that
Hello.
moment of sudden like realization about something,
And then you can do
where
the
you
top.
have that sudden like
And then
moment
we can do
of
the top,
clarity
Daddy.
about something in your
I think I went
life.
too far, but it's
I
okay.
think all of us experiences that at different points in our life, and it's really weird because suddenly you have this realization or this sudden focus of clarity, which is so different because usually each of us is so focused on our day-to-day lives, and we're so entrenched in the subjective experience of all of these different things that are happening constantly in our lives, that to have a true moment of clarity of purpose sometimes stands out as being unique.
Yeah, I love a Mercury Kazemi. Like nice, good, sweet, sweet clarity. It's always really nice.
The moment of realization is worth 1,000 prayers. I think that's from Natural Born Killers.
Do that, Mommy. See?
Hits.
Nice. All right. Well, I think that's a good stopping point then for this forecast for June. Thank you both. This was an awesome and interesting episode where we covered a lot of different things. We talked a lot about this being the sort of precursor to the Venus retrograde and setting up so much stuff that's going to come over the course of the next few months. And I think it was a good discussion of that and good preparation for some of the things that are developing in people's lives over the coming weeks and months.
Thank you. It
Yeah,
was fun.
thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So Kira, what do you have going on, and what do you have coming up in the future? What are
All
you
right.
working on?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm working on an app right now, but that won't be out for a while. It's gonna be a dating app, which is cool. But
Nice.
regardless of that, I have my podcast, Cosmic Guidance for All. I've been trying to do weekly forecasts. It's been hard while traveling, but I'm having a lot of fun doing them. So yeah, weekly forecast, forecasting your work week and your weekend. And then I also just have my books open for readings in June. And if those get booked up, just get on my mailing list. I open up every month. So yeah.
Nice. And what's your website URL again?
Yeah, it's kira.world. Pretty
Perfect.
easy. Yeah.
All right. I'll put a link to that in the description below this video and also on the podcast website for this episode. Austin, what do you have coming up?
Well, I'm going to be giving I'm going to be giving 2 talks and a workshop at Norwalk next week. So that's the end of May. I guess it's already sold out, so I shouldn't even mention it, but I'll see a bunch of you there. Come say hi. Which is not just a friendly thing to say, but literally come say hi. I really need glasses, and so I can't see faces, especially if I've only met you on the internet after about 20 feet. You just look like a person who I may or may not know. So literally come say hi. And then
I hate that so much. Have you had that experience also? If you're looking at somebody, but you can't really see them and you look away and they think that you're like snubbing them,
or
but you actually just
I look like this.
Right,
And
exactly.
I'm kind of irritated because I can't tell.
You're squinting
Right.
at
So
them.
Oh
just,
no, I see
giving
him.
a full double
He's
stink eye.
That was literally my face the entire time I was playing Tears of Kingdom when I was in all that rain and the snow. I was like, where am I going? When I was like, all that snow, I can't imagine like not being able to see very well. He definitely needs to get his eyes checked or he can't see very well.
But so there's that, and then
Okay.
also by the time this episode is out, Sphere and Sundry will have released its project magnum opus. The their big project. I can't give any details. All the details will be made available early morning on the 23rd of May. It's fantastic. It's 5 years in the making.
Bubby, I don't think the villagers can go up here.
Different elections.
You have to
of
put
mine went
steps.
into the creation. Can't say any more right now, but you know, if you
You want me to do it?
You should
Make
absolutely
steps?
check it out. Either wake up at 3 in the morning on or early on Tuesday, or you know, check it when you wake. Check sphereandsundry.com when you wake up. Really exciting stuff. I'm very happy for Kate and proud, and also excited that it's finally going to be out. Because again, this has been like a 5-year project, so finally
Awesome.
crowning.
So
Yeah,
exciting.
that's super exciting. So what are the URL websites again?
So I'm austinkopic.com, and Sphere and Sundry is sphereandsundry.com.
Brilliant. All right, I'll put a link to that in the description below this video. As for myself, things I have coming up, I've just started a clips channel for the Astrology Podcast on YouTube, so I can take some excerpts of longer episodes and just post shorter clips of those. I'll have a link to that. If you just go to the homepage of the Astrology Podcast on YouTube, you'll see the new channel I have set up for that, just called Astrology Podcast Clips. Other than
find
that,
how
I'm
many
working on some
villagers we
great
have.
episodes coming up. I'm working on a possible episode on Mesoamerican astrology. I also have another separate episode I'm working on astrology and health. So a lot of good stuff coming up, and I'm going to release those for early access through my page on Patreon. So I did want to plug that just because
It's
I've hit
12.
400
You said 12?
episodes, and I'm super happy how far the podcast has come, and I've been super grateful. Especially, I wanted to give a shout out and thanks to all the patrons that have supported this work, because it's what allows me to generate basically like free classes on astrology that go really in depth, that I'm able to just release to the public for free. So if you want to support that work, then I would appreciate, you know, if you want to sign up and throw me a few dollars through Patreon. Thank you, and thanks to all the patrons that joined us for the live show today. There's been a lot of great comments in the live chat of just patrons that joined the live stream. So thanks all for joining and for supporting me over the years, because it's made a huge difference and it's made this work possible. All right. I think that's it for this episode. So thanks both of you for joining me today.
Yep, my pleasure.
Thanks.
All right.
All
Thanks
right,
everyone for
y'all.
watching or listening to this episode of the Astrology Podcast, and we'll see you again next time.
Nice. So I listened to most of what they said. I might have to like re-listen, but it seems like this month's not gonna be too bad. From the beginning, what they were talking about was mostly about some of the harsher transits, but there's really not as anywhere nearly as bad as it was in March and April, May. Those months were kind of hard, just because the major planets were changing signs, and so that can kind of. Because I remember when all those planets during signs, like the big major planets that's been in one sign for long periods of times, I got so sick, it was not even funny. And it's because my body was used to certain energies aligning a certain way for so long, because they had been in those signs, those planets have been in those signs for quite a while, that when they all kind of changed signs, it kind of messed me up. And like, I think, in my personal opinion, that it might have had something to do with the fact that I got so sick. Because I was just so much was going on, so much, I was going to therapy, I was addressing a lot of issues, and of course during that time, my body decided to do that. So
I feel good.